So let's dive into some of the beneficial aspects in human study research and kind of review some of these things. So we know, you see this chart, who can benefit from arginine in the diet or arginine supplementation. We've got good data on pregnancy. I'll talk about that. We've got good data on cardiovascular issues. We've got good data on kids. When I say rapid growth, it's generally with children. One of the things that has been problematic over the last several decades is formula, baby formula. Baby formula is generally corn syrup and GMO proteins. A lot of times, especially if you're using one of the soy-based proteins, not so good. And then we get kids that aren't growing or kids that are not hitting their growth. And kids need more arginine than adults. It's actually, earlier when I said that arginine is conditionally essential, one of the conditions of essentiality is rapidly growing children. Another condition of essentiality is pregnancy. So in those two areas. We also know that people under high amounts of stress, there have been studies that when given arginine, people actually perform better under stress and duress. So these are all potential uses or potential case uses to justify the taking arginine. They're more than that. As I walk through these research studies, you'll understand what I mean by that statement. So you can see this is a list or a review paper of a number of different human studies on using arginine for both lipid metabolism and carbohydrate metabolism. And this basically is a summary. So what we have here is a 2-week study using 17 grams a day orally of arginine improves nitrogen balance. Nitrogen balance is basically it improves protein balance. Elevates serum insulin-like growth factor concentrations, reduces T and C and LDL-C levels in elderly humans. This is triglycerides, by the way. And then no adverse effects were observed at doses as high as 17 grams a day, and that's again on a 2-week study. This next one is 3 grams, or rather 3 doses per day of 7 grams orally, and they found that it improved endothelium-dependent dilation, so it helped blood vessels dilate, in hypercholesterolemic young adults. So this is in young patients, which might attenuate the production of atherosclerosis. And this study of 3 doses a day of 3 grams orally increased growth hormone levels in postmenopausal women, which may have implication for muscle growth and bone growth. We come down here, we've got 3 doses of 2 grams a day orally. Arginine enhance effects of exercise inducing changes in fat profile in overweight men. And then here, 3 grams a day orally, it was found to improve lipid profile in patients with acute myocardial infarction. It regulate modified cholesterol levels and increased HDL-C. We found in 2 grams a day orally, it improves glycemia, which is blood glucose, and lipid profile, by that meaning triglycerides and HDL. You can see down here 3 doses of 3 or 6 grams a day orally decreases blood pressure, blood sugar, a chemical in the blood called MDA, which is a marker of a free radical. It reduced triglycerides and increases HDL. Arginine improves anthropometric parameters, meaning body size measurements, blood pressure, and blood biochemical indices in patients with obesity. So a lot of human trials there showing some nice improvements. Now we've got more. That's not even all. So you can see in these trials, this was one where they gave arginine through infusion, and they gave 0.52 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. Arginine improves insulin sensitivity and restores vasodilation in obese and non-insulin dependent diabetic patients. And then we get more to oral studies. So oral, that means by mouth. So 9 grams a day in 3 divided doses improves glucose disposal and systolic blood pressure. The treatment attenuates insulin resistant and type 2 diabetes. In this one, 8.3 grams a day orally. It affected glucose metabolism and insulin sensitivity positively and improved endothelial function, reduced oxidative stress, and adipokine release in obese type 2 diabetic patients. At 6.4 grams a day, it regulated endothelial function, improved insulin sensitivity, and reduced inflammation. 3 doses of 9 grams a day, L-Arginine decreases insulin levels and improves insulin sensitivity in patients with obesity. This is 3 doses of 2 grams a day, so 6 total, increases nitric oxide and total antioxidant status. 3 times 9, L-Arginine decreases plasminogen activator type 1, which basically makes your blood less clotty or less thick and sticky, increases nitric oxide and antioxidant scores, and improves insulin sensitivity in obese patients. In this study, 3 times 9, so 27 grams a day, Arginine affects zinc serum concentrations in obese patients, positive correlation between change in zinc and insulin sensitivity improvement was observed. At 6.6 grams a day, it improved glucose metabolism, insulin secretion, insulin sensitivity, enhanced endothelial function in patients with impaired glucose tolerance and metabolic syndrome. At 6.4 grams a day, improved beta cell function and insulin sensitivity and increased probability to become normal glucose tolerant. At 6.4 grams a day in another study, delays the development of type 2 diabetes in patients and reduce their oxidative stress. So tremendous potential. How many of you have ever talked to your cardiologist as to whether or not Arginine was right for you? All they really ever want to do is pump people full of statin drugs, blood pressure drugs, and diabetic drugs like metformin. And here, what I've just shown you is a host of studies that show that Arginine can have similar effects to all those different medications in human trials. So, you know, as the commercials say, talk to your doctor today to see if Arginine is right for you. I think that's the conversation that you want to try to have. Okay, let's talk about more research. So this is also in humans. They did a control, 3 different diets. They did a control diet. They did a diet enriched by natural foods that contained Arginine. And then they did a third diet, which was no Arginine or low Arginine diet, but they supplemented patients with an equal amount of Arginine as compared to the high food Arginine diet. And here's what they found. This was a blood pressure study, but what they found, and then both groups that were having more Arginine, so in the Arginine-rich diets, they found that systolic blood pressure dropped 6.2 points, and diastolic blood pressure dropped 5 points. And in the Arginine supplemented group, same thing. Systolic blood pressure dropped 6.2 points. Diastolic blood pressure a little bit stronger there, dropped almost 7 points, 6.8 total points in the Arginine supplemented group. These results indicate that a moderate increase in L-Arginine significantly lowered blood pressure and affected renal function and carbohydrate metabolism in healthy volunteers. And this study was done in healthy people. Imagine applying it to people that are not so healthy. I would love to see that outcome. Here's another one. Randomized double-blind placebo-controlled study supplementing with L-Arginine in patients with heart failure. So they gave 15 subjects were given 6 weeks of Arginine or 6 weeks of placebo. Compared with placebo, supplemental Arginine significantly increased forearm blood flow, so it improved blood flow in their arms on average from, well, those are the numbers of the parameters they measured. Furthermore, functional status was significantly better on Arginine compared with placebo, as indicated by their ability to walk longer distances in a 6-minute walking test. They also scored better on living with heart failure questionnaire, so their questionnaire on heart failure improved. Oral Arginine also improved arterial compliance, meaning it made their arteries more elastic. Supplemental Arginine has beneficial effects in patients with heart failure. How many of you with heart failure have ever had your doctor mention Arginine as a potential versus, say, a diuretic, which is what they generally like to do a lot of in heart failure? And unfortunately, diuretics actually contribute to heart failure because they block vitamin B1, and that can contribute to congestive heart failure as well. Here's a study review on Arginine for erectile dysfunction. And so, guys, if you've struggled with erectile dysfunction, Arginine may have a tremendous impact. Positive evidence is available for the efficacy of arginine and its various combinations. The dosing, for a lot of these studies on these reviews are anywhere between like 3 and 6 grams of arginine a day, and some go even higher. But point being, this is an amino acid. Now, let's go back to kind of the fundamental of understanding this. I said this is an amino acid. Where do they come from predominantly? All amino acids. The bulk of high-quality amino acids in the human diet comes from animal foods. Eggs, chicken, fish, turkey, beef, lamb, etc. Now, you can get some from plants, nuts, and seeds. There certainly are, but quantitatively nowhere near the level. And what we've seen in the last number of decades is a war on protein. You still see it. It's being fought every day in the nutritional trenches, so to speak. But there's this huge war on protein where there's an attack. And when we battle and we attack, what we actually do is we create protein malnourishment through amino acid deficiencies. And I've seen more and more over the last many years, more and more amino acid deficiencies where people are scared to eat protein. They've been told the animal protein is going to cause heart disease, cancer, and every other nefarious chronic autoimmune degenerative inflammatory disease on the planet. They're even trying to blame animal farts on global warming, and I think that's kind of a ridiculous notion. We need protein. Humans need protein. There's 20 amino acids, so we're talking about arginine being one of those 20. 9 of them are essential, meaning you have to get them from food. You can't make them. Whereas we've talked about with arginine, it's a conditionally essential amino acid, meaning that you can make it from the other 9, but you can't make it under certain conditions like growth and pregnancy, etc. So it's very important to take that in context, because how many of you are limiting your animal foods because you have a cardiologist that told you to? And here we're talking about one of the primary constituents of animal food, amino acid called arginine, being capable and successful of lowering blood pressure, lowering triglycerides, reducing platelet clotting in your blood, as this study shows, which we'll talk about. We know it improves insulin sensitivity. We know it can reduce your weight. So why wouldn't we consider having protein with adequate amounts of arginine in our diet? So here, this study was talking about arginine being used for platelet aggregation. Now, platelets are what clot your blood. So in this case, they were giving 8.4 grams a day orally or a placebo, and this was a 2-week study. And what they found, and again, it's double-blinded, placebo-controlled, that dietary arginine supplementation can modestly attenuate the increased platelet reactivity seen in hypercholesterolemic patients. So basically, it thinned the blood. It reduced the potential for the blood to clump and clot, which is one of the risk factors associated with cardiovascular disease. But that's not all. Let's talk about more research. Let's talk about pregnancy. For those of you who maybe currently pregnant or know somebody who's pregnant, L-Arginine supplementation in pregnancy. This is a systematic review of maternal and fetal outcomes. And so in this particular review, they actually took 1,028 publications, but of those, they pared those down to 51 studies that were eligible for their criteria in their research review. 25 of these studies were performed in women, and the rest were performed in animals. So this is a mixture of human-animal study. Arginine reduced the development of preeclampsia. 4 studies showed that. So if you've ever heard of preeclampsia, it's when the blood pressure goes up during pregnancy, and it can create life-threatening situations and hospitalization for pregnant women. As you can see here, decreased blood pressure reduced the need for antihypertensive drugs in women. So it kept these women also off of medicine during their pregnancy, which we want to do. There's always a risk giving a pregnant woman medications. And so if an amino acid can reduce the risk and potentially lead them to not needing that hypertensive medication, that's a win. In women carrying growth-retarded fetuses, arginine improved fetal-placental circulation. So it improved the blood flow to the baby, birth weight, and neonatal outcomes in 5 studies, while in the case of threatened preterm birth, arginine reduced uterine contractions. In several animal species, arginine supplementation in pregnancy improved reproductive performance by increasing the litter number and the size. Moreover, in preeclamptic and metabolic syndrome experimental models, maternal hypertension and fetal growth were improved. So, both human and animal studies enhancing pregnancy outcomes, reducing the potential for blood pressure issues and preeclampsia in pregnancy. Here we have another study, and this is in humans. This is a human response. So we've got arginine enhances wound healing and improves lymphocyte immune response in humans. So we had this study was randomized into 3 groups. Supplement of 30 grams of arginine in one group, a supplement of 30 grams of arginine aspartate in another group, or a placebo. The supplements were given orally. They were given for 2 weeks. Arginine supplementation significantly enhanced the amount of collagen deposited into standardized wounds. So this was a wound-based study, and so they showed that it enhanced and accelerated wound healing. Additionally, arginine supplementation at both doses increased lymphocyte mitogenesis. That means it enhanced lymphocyte production in response to the damage. And the data suggests that arginine may be of clinical benefit in improving wound healing and immune responses. Now, I've seen this for years. We've given supplemental arginine and glutamine and other amino acids in people that were going into surgery. And, for years, we've seen our patients heal 2-3 times faster than people not supplementing with key amino acids to aid in the healing process post-surgically. So this is just another study corroborating that type of information. Now, we've also got, this is interesting, on cancer, and this is, there's a class of medications. If you ever heard of immunotherapy, it's all the rage now in cancer treatment. But you can see the discovery of immune checkpoint inhibitors, which is, again, this is a form of immunotherapy. What they found is that not everybody responds real well to immunotherapy. It's actually been kind of a letdown in the cancer world because it had all this promise, and then people just weren't responding really well. So what these researchers were doing was they were trying to figure out why some people respond and others don't. And one of the things that they found was that patients that had low arginine levels at baseline were significantly and independently associated with worse clinical benefit rate, progression-free survival, and overall survival. So they didn't do as well, and they didn't survive as well, the ones that had low arginine on the front end. So here you go, conclusion. We demonstrate that baseline arginine levels predict immune therapy response in cancer patients. Plasma arginine quantification may therefore represent an attractive biomarker to tailor novel therapeutic regimens targeting the arginine pathway in combination with the medication. I mean, that says a lot right there. And I know this is not a definitive research study for all people with cancer, but what it's basically saying is people with arginine deficiency don't do as well with the treatment. And go back to what I said earlier, which is we've demonized protein, especially in the cancer world. Look at how many websites, how many even government entities tell you avoid animal proteins if you have cancer, go plant-based if you have cancer. And here you are setting yourself up for failure. Because your body requires amino acids to function, especially when you're sick. Especially when you're sick. Here's another study on exercise performance. So arginine supplementation, similar to the effects of increased dietary nitric oxide intake, elevating nitric oxide bioavailability through dietary arginine supplementation reduced the oxygen cost of moderate intensity exercise and blunted the VO2 slow component and extended the time to exhaustion during severe intensity exercise. So, maybe some of you are trying to train a little bit more aggressively or heavily, and you're frustrated and you're intolerant to the exercise. What they're showing is that arginine supplementation, and in most of the studies around arginine, the doses are like 3 to 6 grams 1 hour before the workout. So if you're looking to try this, that's where you want to kind of lean or start. So somewhere in this neighborhood. More studies. So these again, we're talking about pretty much predominantly all human studies so far, right? Here's one recently done on adding arginine to patients with COVID-19. And this was a double-blinded, randomized, placebo-controlled trial as well. And so what you can see here, the parallel group study done on patients hospitalized for severe COVID-19. Patients received 1.66 grams of arginine twice a day, so approximately 3.3 grams a day, or a placebo. And this was given orally, not IV. What was the outcome? In this interim analysis, adding arginine to standard therapy in patients with severe COVID significantly decreases the length of hospitalization and reduces the respiratory support at 10 days out. So improvement there. And we go back again to protein. Why protein? Well, arginine has special functions, but protein as a whole is where we get arginine. So don't forget that. Don't throw away the food group. Don't, as the proverbial saying goes, don't throw away the baby with the bathwater. Don't abandon your protein because, you know, a bunch of people online are telling you that plant-based or animal-based diets are dangerous. Okay. This is now we're going to get into some animal studies. L-Arginine metabolism inhibits arthritis and inflammatory bone loss. Now, this is a study that was performed in transgenic knockout mice, but also in human serum. So they took sick people's serum and they took transgenic mice, and what they came to as a result of doing this study is they demonstrated that arginine ameliorates arthritis and bone erosion through metabolic reprogramming and perturbation of purine metabolism and osteoclasts. Let's make that sound English. Basically, it helped to regulate osteoclasts. Osteoclasts are the types of cells that degrade bone. And so taking arginine, supplemental arginine, enhanced the regulation of osteoclast production, and so you had less bone loss and less overall inflammation. And I think, you know, that's the important takeaway. It's the same thing we see, as I mentioned earlier, with post-surgical outcomes when people are having scheduled inflammatory trauma, because that's what surgery is. You know, when we get them on arginine and other amino acids, they heal faster. They have less inflammation. They have less surgical complications. I thought this was interesting. You know, this year I'm talking a lot about mold. For those of you who follow me, you may already know that. And so we're looking at nutrition under the lens of mold and mycotoxin poisoning as well. And so I would be remiss to not add a little bit of information here. There's several studies in animals, none in humans, but several studies in animals on how arginine can do several things. In this particular research study, this was done in growing pigs, and what they found is that when they gave the pigs arginine supplementation, it remedied liver injury caused by mycotoxins. So basically, it helped their livers. It helped protect these growing pigs' livers. And you know, you have to understand, in the farming world, that means everything to the farmer, because most animals in the farming world, what do they feed them? They feed them grain, and even worse, predominantly GMO grain. And one of the bad things about grain is it's very highly contaminated with mold toxins. And so this can make animals sick. It can make, you know, it can make adult animals not have any more babies. It can kill them. It can cause liver damage and kidney damage and cancers. And so as a farmer, this is your livelihood. You don't want your animals to die, but you also want to be able to get cheap grain. This is a cheap way to feed your animals. You don't want to spend more feeding them than what you have to, but feeding them bad things, you also don't want them to die. So adding supplements to their feed has been a long-term solution to offset mold and mycotoxin damage, and arginine is one of those things that that's been shown to be beneficial. There are other studies that show that arginine reduces mold toxic exposure in other ways as well, but this is one of the main ones that I wanted to show you today as it relates to mold.